The pathetic human's frail body convulsed with pain as the Krenim's scanners probed the captive's mind, revealing intel that made General Juno grin with wicked triumph. The primitives had not even harnessed the untold power saturating their atmosphere, and would soon be crushed under the Empire's boots. Lieutenant Ethan Hicks, elite recon pilot of the EDF, grimaced as his ship's alarms blared, the Krenim tractor beam reeling him inexorably into their warship's belly. The still-healing scar across his temple throbbed, memories of his last clash with the aliens' brutal forces resurfacing. But this mission was crucial. Earth needed every scrap of intel on Krenim capabilities before launching a desperate counterattack. Humanity's survival hinged on his success. Krenim troops dragged Ethan's bloodied form before General Juno's sneering visage. "Your kind's resistance is laughable," Juno spat. "Our probes reveal your world's pitiful state. You've not even tamed the energies permeating your skies. My armada will grind your cities to dust." Ethan lifted his head, eyes blazing. "Underestimate us at your peril, Juno. You'll never live to see Earth fall." Juno scoffed. "I'll keep you alive to witness your species' extinction. Take him away." As soldiers hauled Ethan to the brig, he tapped the homing beacon hidden in his collar. Earth had one chance. His encoded transmission contained revelations that could finally even the odds. All humanity's hopes now rested on a single, desperate gambit. The Krenim warship's brig was a Spartan affair, little more than a metal box with a force field for bars. Ethan paced the cell like a caged tiger, his mind racing as he searched for any means of escape. He ran his hands along the featureless walls, hoping to find a hidden panel or loose plate. No such luck. The cell was designed to be inescapable. Ethan slumped onto the hard bench, frustration mounting. He couldn't just sit here while Juno plotted Earth's destruction. He had to find a way out, had to complete his mission. The warship suddenly shuddered violently, nearly throwing Ethan from his seat. Emergency klaxons blared and the lights switched to pulsing red. An attack? A malfunction? Ethan didn't know, but he wasn't about to waste this opportunity. He leaped to his feet and retrieved a small lockpick hidden in the hem of his jacket. Crossing to the cell door, he felt along the edges of the control panel until he found the manual release. Ethan made quick work of the lock, his fingers flying. Just as the force field crackled and vanished, a trio of armed Krenim guards came rushing past. Ethan didn't hesitate. He burst from the cell and slammed into the first guard, driving his fist into the alien's throat. The Krenim dropped with a strangled cry. Ethan spun, lashing out with a kick that caught the second guard in the knee. Bone crunched, and the Krenim toppled. The third guard raised his weapon, but Ethan was faster. He lunged forward, striking at pressure points in the guard's neck and chest. The Krenim crumpled. Ethan quickly stripped one of the guards and donned his armored uniform. The fit was tight, but it would have to do. He collected a pulse rifle and a bandolier of plasma grenades from the other unconscious Krenim. Then he was moving, heading for the nearest computer terminal. It only took a moment to pull up the ship's status reports. Ethan's heart leaped as he read the flashing alerts. A small Earth Defense Force strike team had boarded the warship. They were here to rescue him and to sabotage the Krenim vessel. Ethan grinned fiercely. It was time to turn the tables on Juno. He set off through the corridors, the pulse rifle nestled in his shoulder. The warship's layout was unfamiliar, but Ethan moved with purpose, determined to locate his comrades. The sound of pulse fire and shouting drew him like a lodestone. He came around a corner and found himself in the middle of a firefight. The Earth Strike team was hunkered down behind a makeshift barricade, trading shots with a squad of Krenim soldiers. Ethan didn't hesitate. He dove for cover and opened fire, his pulse rifle spitting blue-white bolts of energy. Krenim fell, their armor scorched and smoking. "Hicks," a familiar voice bellowed. "That you?" Ethan risked a glance over his barricade. The strike team leader, a burly man named Gomez, was gesturing to him. Ethan nodded and Gomez tossed him an extra communicator. "Change of plans," Gomez said, his voice crackling over the comm. "I need you with me. We're headed for the central computer core to upload a virus, cripple this tub. The rest of the team will make for the engine room, plant some charges. It's time we gave these Kreenim bastards a taste of their own medicine. Ethan flashed a predatory grin. Lead the way, Gomez. Let's send this ship straight to hell. Together, they fought their way deeper into the warship, pulse rifles blazing. Krenim soldiers fell before their onslaught, unable to stand against the skill and determination of the Earth warriors. Finally, they stood before the heavily fortified door of the computer core. Ethan and Gomez set to work on the computer core's blast doors, sweat beading on their brows as they tried to hack the locking mechanism. Suddenly, the sound of heavy footsteps echoed through the corridor. Ethan whirled, pulse rifle at the ready, as General Juno strode into view, flanked by a squad of elite Krenim soldiers. "Drop your weapons, humans," Juno sneered, his own rifle aimed squarely at Ethan's chest. "I knew your kind was foolish, but I didn't think you were outright suicidal." Ethan hit the deck and rolled, coming up behind a support pillar. He blind-fired around the edge of the pillar, the pulse rifle bucking in his grip. Krenim soldiers scattered, seeking cover of their own. Across the corridor, Gomez lobbed a plasma grenade into the midst of the Krenim formation. The grenade detonated with a blinding flash and a thunderous roar, vaporizing several soldiers where they stood. Under cover of the explosion, Ethan and Gomez charged forward, closing with the survivors. Ethan slammed into a hulking Krenim, grappling with the alien in a brutal hand-to-hand melee. They traded blows, fists and elbows smashing into flesh and bone. Ethan finally gained the upper hand, wrenching the Kreenim's head around in a vicious twist. The alien's neck snapped with a sickening crack. Nearby, Gomez battled another soldier, dodging the Krenim's claw-like strikes. Spotting an opening, Gomez lunged inside his opponent's guard and snatched the ceremonial dagger from the alien's belt. He plunged the blade into the Krenim's neck, hot blood spurting over his hand. As the smoke and dust settled, only Juno, Ethan and Gomez remained standing amidst the bodies of the fallen Kreenim. Ethan and Juno locked eyes, their sidearms coming up to aim at each other's heads in the same instant. Behind Juno, Gomez staggered to the computer core's interface, one hand pressed to a bleeding wound in his side. With shaking fingers, he laboriously typed in the virus that would cripple the Krenim warship. Just as the virus began to upload, a fresh wave of heavily armed Krenim soldiers flooded into the corridor, their weapons trained on Ethan and Gomez. The two humans were hopelessly outnumbered and outgunned. Ethan and Gomez shared a fierce grin, a final acknowledgement of the bond they'd forged in the crucible of combat. Then, moving as one, they detonated the plasma grenade strapped to their chests. The resulting explosion was cataclysmic, obliterating the computer core Juno and the Kreenim reinforcements in a maelstrom of white-hot plasma. Possibly miraculously, Ethan and Gomez emerged from the inferno alive, their armor scorched and smoking, but their bodies intact. Behind them, the computer core was a twisted ruin, but the virus had done its work. The Kreenim warship systems went haywire, life support failing and artificial gravity fluctuating wildly. Ethan and Gomez staggered through the dying ship, making for the hangar bay. If they could just hijack a shuttle, they might still escape this doomed vessel. In the corridors, they encountered the rest of the Earth strike team, battered but triumphant. They'd successfully sabotaged the warship's engines, condemning the mighty vessel to a fiery death. Together, the humans fought their way into the hangar and stormed aboard a Krenim dropship. Pulsefire chased them across the deck as they piled inside. Ethan slammed his fist on the launch controls, and the dropship blasted free of the hangar, narrowly outpacing the spreading flames. Moments later, the Kreenim warship exploded in a blinding flash of light, the shockwave battering the fleeing dropship. Ethan and Gomez sagged in their seats, exhausted and bleeding but alive. They'd done the impossible, struck a devastating blow against the Kreenim, and lived to tell the tale. But their elation was short-lived. Warning lights flashed across the dropship's control panel. The vessel had been critically damaged in their escape. Engines sputtering, the dropship careened into the void, its occupants unharmed, but adrift in the cold blackness of space. The crippled Krenim dropship tumbled through the void, its hull pitted and scorched from the narrowly survived destruction of the Krenim warship. Inside the cramped confines, Ethan, Gomez, and the battered remnants of the Earth strike team took stock of their dire situation. "Life support's holding steady," reported Sergeant Hawkins, the team's engineer. "But engines and comms are shot to hell. I'll do what I can, but don't expect miracles." Ethan nodded grimly, his face lit by the dim emergency lighting. He turned to Gomez, who was rifling through their meager supplies. "What have we got, Gomez?" Ethan asked, his voice tight. Gomez shook his head. "Enough food and water for maybe a week, but oxygen's low and we're down to our last few medkits." Suddenly a shrill alarm pierced the tense silence. Ethan lunged for the sensor console, his eyes widening at the readout. "Proximity alert," he barked. "Something big, coming in fast." The team crowded around the console, jaws dropping as the massive silhouette of a Krenim dreadnought loomed into view, blotting out the stars. The behemoth vessel dwarfed their tiny dropship, its armored hull bristling with weapons. A harsh voice crackled over the comm, the Krenim commander's tone dripping with disdain. "Earth vessel, this is the Krenim dreadnought Inexorable. You are trespassing in Krenim space. Surrender immediately or be destroyed." The Krenim commander's reply was cold and pitiless. "So be it, human." As the dropship was reeled in like a fish on a line, Ethan's mind raced. They couldn't outrun the dreadnought, couldn't outgun it. But maybe, just maybe, they could outsmart it. He gathered the team, his voice low and urgent. "Listen up, we've got one shot at this. We rig the dropship's reactor to blow, turn this tub into a makeshift bomb, ram it right down their throats." Gomez's eyes widened, then narrowed in grim understanding. He nodded sharply. "Let's do it." The team sprang into action, Hawkins hastily jury-rigging the reactor while the others donned pressure suits and maglock boots. Ethan gripped his communicator, syncing it to the reactor's detonator. The dropship shuddered as it was drawn into the dreadnought's massive hangar. Ethan positioned himself at the airlock, his hand poised over the release. "Get ready," he growled, "on my mark." The dropship settled to the hangar deck with a metallic clang. Ethan slammed his fist against the airlock control. "Mark!" The team exploded out of the dropship, mag boots clanging against the hull as they scrambled clear. Ethan's thumb stabbed down on his communicator. The dropship vanished in a blinding flash of light and heat, the explosion tearing a ragged hole in the dreadnought's hangar. Secondary blasts ripped through the cavernous space as ignited fuel lines turned docked Krenim fighters into blooming fireballs. Amid the chaos and swirling smoke, Ethan and his team slipped through the gaping breach into the dreadnought's superstructure. Pulse rifles at the ready, they forged ahead, determined to strike at the very heart of the Krenim vessel. Krenim patrols barred their way, the corridors echoing with the bark of pulse fire and the sizzle of energy beams. Ethan and Gomez led the charge, their weapons spitting blue-white bolts of destruction. They fought with the desperate strength of cornered wolves, each soldier driven by the knowledge that failure meant not just their own deaths, but the doom of all Earth. Deck by deck, meter by hard-won meter, they battled their way towards the dreadnought's main reactor, leaving a trail of Krenim corpses in their wake. Ethan's face was grim, his eyes hard as flint. They had to succeed. They would succeed. There was no other choice. Ethan's heart pounded as he and his team raced through the dreadnought's labyrinthine corridors, the massive vessel's main reactor their target. Sweat beaded on his brow, his grip tightening on his pulse rifle. They were close now, so close to striking a crippling blow against the Krenim. Suddenly plasma fire erupted from all sides, sizzling through the air. Krenim shock troopers poured into the corridor, their weapons spitting deadly energy, and at their head a towering, cybernetically enhanced monstrosity, Korzak, a brute of a warrior encased in gleaming black armor, an energized battle-axe crackling in his hands. "Cover!" Ethan roared, diving behind a bulkhead as his team scrambled for safety. Plasma bolts scorched the walls, filling the air with the acrid scent of ozone. Ethan caught Gomez's eye signaling frantically. Gomez nodded, barking orders to the strike team. They took up positions, laying down a blistering, suppressing fire that sent the Krenim ducking for cover. Seizing the moment, Ethan broke from cover, circling around to flank the enemy. His heart hammered in his chest as he charged towards Kozak, a battle cry tearing from his throat. Kozak whirled, his battle-axe scything through the air. Ethan ducked beneath the humming blade, feeling the heat of its energy field singe his hair. He brought up his pulse rifle and fired point-blank into Kozak's chest, the shot sparking harmlessly off the cyborg's armored exoskeleton. Kozak laughed, a harsh metallic sound. His backhand caught Ethan square in the chest, sending him flying. Ethan crashed into a bulkhead, the impact driving the air from his lungs. His rifle clattered away, skittering across the deck. The cyborg advanced, his battle-axe crackling with deadly energy. Ethan scrambled to his feet, his eyes darting desperately for a weapon. His gaze fell on a fallen shock trooper, a plasma lance, still clutched in the corpse's hand. Ethan lunged for the lance, snatching it up just as Kozak's axe cleaved down. He brought the lance up, catching the axe's blade in a shower of sparks. The force of the blow sent shockwaves up Ethan's arms, but he gritted his teeth and held fast. They dueled across the reactor room catwalk, trading blows in a furious dance of death. Kozak's strength was monstrous, his every strike threatening to smash through Ethan's guard. But Ethan was quick and agile, darting in to land stinging blows before whirling away. Below them, Gomez and the strike team fought desperately, slowly giving ground before the Krenim onslaught. Plasma fire stitched the air, the deck plates growing slick with blood. Ethan's world narrowed to the catwalk, to the hum and clash of energy weapons, to the sweat stinging his eyes and the burn of exertion in his muscles. He parried a savage cut from Kozak, the cyborg's battle-axe leaving a molten scar across the catwalk railing. And then he saw it. A gap in Kozak's defenses, a hairline fracture in the armor beneath the cyborg's arm joint. Ethan feinted left, then spun, thrusting his lance with all his strength. The lance's tip pierced Kozak's armor, sinking deep into the cyborg's flesh. Kozak roared, a sound of mingled pain and fury, his axe lashing out in a wild frenzy. Ethan pressed the attack, raining blows on the wounded cyborg, driving him back step by step. Kozak's movements grew sluggish, hydraulic fluid leaking from his ruptured armor to pool on the catwalk. With a final desperate thrust, Ethan drove his lance through Kozak's chest, the crackling plasma blade bursting from the cyborg's back. Kozak staggered, his battle-axe falling from nerveless fingers to clatter on the catwalk. Ethan kicked out, his boot slamming into Kozak's chest. The cyborg toppled, arms flailing as he plummeted from the catwalk. He struck the swirling plasma of the reactor core and vanished, instantly vaporized in a blinding flash of light. The Krenim shock troopers, seeing their leader fall, broke and ran, their nerves shattered. Ethan sagged against the railing, his chest heaving as he gulped down air. Gomez and the others staggered up to join him, their faces haggard but triumphant. "Charges," Ethan gasped out. "Plant them around the reactor, hurry!" The team scrambled to obey, setting explosive charges at critical junctures. Then they were running again, fighting their way through the last pockets of Krenim resistance towards the dreadnought's escape pods. They piled into a pod, Ethan slamming his fist down on the launch controls. The pod blasted free of the dreadnought, hurtling into the void. Moments later, the charges detonated. The dreadnought heaved, great gouts of flame erupting from its hull as secondary explosions ripped through its superstructure. Ethan watched through the pod's viewport as the mighty vessel shuddered and broke apart, consumed in a blossoming fireball brighter than a sun. As the glare faded, Ethan allowed himself a small, grim smile. They had done it. They had struck a blow the Krenim would not soon forget. But the war was far from over. The Krenim escape pod shuddered and bucked as it knifed through the planet's atmosphere, its hull glowing cherry red from the friction. Inside, Ethan and his battered team clung to their harnesses, teeth gritted against the bone-jarring turbulence. With a teeth-rattling impact, the pod slammed into the rocky ground, skidding and bouncing, before finally coming to rest in a shallow crater. Ethan shook his head to clear the ringing from his ears, then reached over to check on his team. "Sound off," he barked. "Everyone alive?" A chorus of groans and affirmatives came back. Ethan allowed himself a small sigh of relief. They'd made it down in one piece, but their troubles were far from over. Sergeant Hawkins, the team's engineer, was already out of his harness and assessing the damage. His face was grim as he turned to Ethan. "Homing beacons fried, sir," he reported. "Comms too. We're not calling for help any time soon." Ethan's jaw tightened. Stranded on an unknown world with no way to contact Earth. This mission had just gone from bad to worse. He popped the hatch and climbed out of the pod, pulse rifle at the ready. The rest of the team followed suit, fanning out to secure the perimeter. The landscape that greeted them was bleak and forbidding, a wasteland of jagged rocks and towering cliffs beneath a leaden sky. Thin, sickly vegetation clung to life in the cracks and crevices. They'd barely taken a dozen steps from the pod when the ambush hit. Plasma bolts sizzled out of the rocks around them, searing the air. Cranium hunters, clad in mottled grey camouflage, rose from concealed positions, weapons blazing. "Cover!" Ethan roared, diving behind a boulder. His team scattered, seeking whatever scant shelter they could find. They returned fire, pulse rifles cracking, but it was a losing battle. The cranium had the high ground and the element of surprise. One by one, Ethan's team was cut down, plasma bolts burning through armor and flesh. A searing pain exploded in Ethan's shoulder as a plasma shot found its mark. His rifle fell from nerveless fingers. Darkness crashed over him. He awoke to a nightmare. He was bound to a chair in a dimly lit room, his armor stripped away. His shoulder wound throbbed with every heartbeat. Across from him, the rest of his team were similarly restrained, beaten and bloody. A door hissed open, and a cranium officer strode in, flanked by a pair of guards. The officer was tall and lean, his face a mass of scars. His eyes were cold and merciless. "I am Commander Zortak," he said, his voice a rasping snarl. "You humans have cost me dearly. General Juno dead, our mighty dreadnought destroyed. Someone must answer for this." He leaned in close to Ethan, his breath hot and fetid. "That someone is you." What followed was a blurred agony of pain and questions, Zortak demanding the codes to Earth's planetary defense grid. Ethan gritted his teeth and endured, spitting defiance, even as Zortak's fists split his lips and broke his ribs. But Zortak was relentless, his methods growing more sadistic with each refusal. Ethan's world narrowed to a haze of blood and suffering until he no longer knew where he was or how long he'd been there. And then a new horror. Zortak had Gomez dragged before Ethan, the big man sagging between two guards. "The codes," Zortak hissed. "Give them to me or watch your friend die by inches." He nodded to the guards. They let Gomez drop to the floor and began to beat him, their armored fists rising and falling with brutal efficiency. Gomez's agonized cries filled the room. "Stop!" Ethan screamed, straining against his bonds. "I'll do it. I'll give you the codes. Just stop!" But even as the words left his mouth, he knew he couldn't betray Earth, couldn't betray the billions counting on him. He slumped in his chair, tears of helpless rage streaming down his face. "I can't," he whispered. "God help me, I can't." Zortak's face contorted with fury. He drew his plasma pistol and leveled it at Gomez's head. Something broke inside Ethan then, some last restraint of sanity or mercy. With a howl of primal rage, he surged up from the chair, the bonds snapping like rotten twine. He launched himself at Zortak, grappling for the pistol. They crashed to the floor, a tangle of flailing limbs and snarling faces. Zortak was strong, his muscles enhanced by cranium biotech, but Ethan fought with the strength of madness, the strength of a man with nothing left to lose. Zortak's fist crashed into Ethan's wounded shoulder, sending white-hot agony lancing through him. But Ethan barely felt it. His hand closed around Zortak's wrist, twisting savagely. Bones snapped and Zortak screamed. The pistol fell from his nerveless fingers. Ethan snatched it up and jammed it under Zortak's chin. The cranium's eyes widened in sudden fear. "For Gomez, you son of a bitch!" Ethan snarled and pulled the trigger. The pistol roared and Zortak's head vanished in a spray of superheated gore. Ethan staggered to his feet, the pistol clutched in a white-knuckled grip. Zortak's key card glinted on the dead Krenim's belt. Ethan scooped it up, then turned to free his surviving team members. Wounded and reeling, they fought their way out of the compound like cornered animals, all thought of stealth or tactics forgotten in the raw need to escape, to survive. Krenim soldiers fell before their onslaught, cut down by stolen plasma rifles and the last dregs of human fury. They burst onto the landing pad, pulse fire sizzling at their heels. A Krenim shuttle squatted there, its hatch invitingly open. They piled aboard, Ethan flinging himself into the pilot's seat. His hands flew over the controls, muscle memory guiding him through the startup sequence. The shuttle's engines roared to life and they blasted into the sky, leaving the blood-soaked compound behind. Ethan sagged back in his seat, his whole body one great mass of pain. But pain was good. Pain meant he was still alive. Alive and burning with the need for vengeance. Gomez's death played over and over in his mind, an endless loop of agony and rage. The Krenim would pay for this, Ethan vowed. If it took his last breath, his last drop of blood, he would make them pay. Ethan's hands flew over the stolen shuttle's controls, his face set in grim determination as he plotted a course for the nearby space station. The battered remnants of his team slumped in their seats, nursing their wounds and their grief. The loss of Gomez hung heavy in the air, a palpable weight on all their shoulders. Suddenly the shuttle's comm crackled to life, a distorted voice cutting through the static. "Mayday, Mayday, this is Proxima Station. We are under attack by Krenim forces. Repeat, we are under attack, requesting immediate assistance." Ethan's eyes narrowed. The Krenim here. His fingers tightened on the controls, knuckles whitening. This was their chance, an opportunity to strike back at the monsters who had taken Gomez from them. He turned to his team, his voice hard as steel. "Gear up, we're going in." As the shuttle approached the besieged station, the scars of battle became apparent. The station's hull was pockmarked with plasma scorches, and debris from shattered ships tumbled in the void. Lances of energy crisscrossed the space between the station and the attacking Krenim vessels. Ethan guided the shuttle towards the station's airlock, deftly weaving through the chaos. The instant the docking clamps engaged, he was out of his seat, pulse rifle in hand. The airlock hissed open, revealing a scene of utter pandemonium. Krenim boarders swarmed through the station's corridors, exchanging fire with the outgunned station security. The air was thick with the ozone tang of plasma and the cries of the wounded and dying. Ethan and his team waded into the fray, their weapons spitting blue-white death. They fought with the fury of the damned, each shot, each kill a tribute to Gomez's memory. Inch by blood-soaked inch, they battled their way towards the station's command center. The corridors were a maze of twisted metal and flickering emergency lights, echoing with the clash of weapons and the sizzle of plasma. As they neared the command center, the resistance intensified. Krenim shock troopers in heavy armor blocked their path, laying down a withering hail of suppressive fire. Ethan and his team took cover, trading shots from behind hastily improvised barricades. "Grenades!" Ethan roared over the din of battle. Hawkins and the others lobbed plasma grenades over the barricades. The explosions rocked the corridor, the flash of detonations strobing through the smoke. The shock troopers' fire slackened. They advanced, leapfrogging from cover to cover, pulse rifles blazing. The shock troopers fell back, their lines broken by the ferocity of the humans' assault. Ethan and his team burst into the command center, weapons at the ready. The sight that greeted them stopped them cold. A group of Krenim soldiers stood in the center of the room, their rifles trained on the huddled forms of the station's command crew, and at their head, a tall, imperious figure in ornate armor, a cruel smile playing about his thin lips. "Captain Vordan," Ethan growled, recognition and hatred mingling in his voice. Vordan was a legend, a Krenim commander known across the galaxy for his tactical brilliance and his utter ruthlessness. He had orchestrated some of the Krenim's most devastating victories against Earth's forces. "Ah, the tenacious Lieutenant Hicks," Vordan said, his voice smooth as silk. "I must applaud your persistence, but you're too late. The access codes to the station's weapons lab will soon be mine, and with them, the key to Earth's destruction." He and his team fanned out, their weapons trained on the Krenim. Vordan's soldiers shifted, fingers tightening on triggers. The tension in the room was thick enough to cut with a knife. Vordan chuckled, a low, menacing sound. "Come now, Lieutenant. You're outnumbered and outgunned. Surrender, and I may spare your lives." Ethan's response was a pulse bolt that scorched the air inches from Vordan's head, and with that the command center erupted in chaos. Plasma bolts crisscrossed the room as Ethan and his team engaged the Krenim in a vicious close-quarters firefight. Consoles exploded in showers of sparks, and acrid smoke filled the air. Amidst the confusion, Ethan saw his chance. He lunged for the hostages, firing one-handed as he hauled them to their feet. "Move!" he yelled, shoving them towards cover. The freed hostages snatched up fallen weapons and joined the fight, adding their fire to the humans. The tide was turning. Vordan's face contorted with rage as he saw his plan unraveling. With a snarl, he reached to his belt and drew a cylindrical object. A snap hiss, and a blade of pure plasma extended from the hilt, a plasma sword, a deadly relic of a bygone age. Ethan met Vordan's charge, his own plasma blade leaping to life. Their swords clashed in a blinding flare of energy, the force of the impact sending shockwaves through Ethan's arms. They dueled across the command center, blades flashing in a deadly dance. Vordan was a master swordsman, his every move precise and calculated. But Ethan fought with the fury of a man possessed, his grief and rage lending strength to his blows. Parry, riposte, thrust. The air sizzled with the clash of their blades. Ethan drove Vordan back with a relentless onslaught, his sword a blur of blue-white plasma. Vordan's eyes widened in surprise as he found himself on the defensive. He had underestimated this human, underestimated the power of his emotion. Sensing weakness, Ethan redoubled his attack. With a final mighty blow, he knocked Vordan's sword from his grasp and forced the Krenim to his knees, the point of his blade hovering inches from Vordan's throat. "It's over, Vordan," Ethan panted, his chest heaving. "Tell me the Krenim's plans for Earth, now." But Vordan only laughed, a sound devoid of mirth. "You fool," he spat. "You've already lost. Even now, our ultimate weapon, a planet killer of unimaginable power, is en route to your precious Earth. Nothing can stop it. Nothing." Ethan's blood ran cold at Vordan's words. A planet killer headed for Earth? No, it couldn't be true. His hand darted to his belt and emerged with a pulsing device, a plasma grenade primed to detonate. Time seemed to slow. Ethan saw the grenade leave Vordan's hand, tumbling end over end towards him. He threw himself back, desperately trying to put distance between himself and the impending blast. The grenade detonated in a blinding flash of light and heat. The shockwave slammed into Ethan, hurling him across the room. He hit the far wall with bone-cracking force and slid to the floor, his vision swimming. Through the ringing in his ears, he heard the cries of his team, the sizzle of extinguishing fires. He forced himself to his hands and knees, shaking his head to clear it. Where Vordan had been was now a smoking crater, the edges glowing with residual heat. The Krenim captain had been vaporized in the blast, taking his secrets with him to the grave. But there was no time to dwell on that now. Earth was in danger, and every second counted. Ethan staggered to his feet, his whole body one great ache. "To the command console," he ordered, his voice ragged. "We need to warn Earth, and fast." His team obeyed without question, Hawkins' fingers flying over the keys as he fought to establish a long-range connection. The seconds ticked by with agonizing slowness. Finally, a crackle of static, and then a voice, distorted but unmistakable. "This is Earth Command. Identify yourself." Ethan leaned heavily on the console, his vision blurring. "This is Lieutenant Ethan Hicks," he said, his words slurring. "We have critical information." Ethan's voice was ragged as he briefed his team on the station's bridge, the weight of their discovery heavy on his shoulders. "The Krenim's planet killer," he said, jaw tight. "It's at a fortified base on the edge of their territory. We have to infiltrate it, sabotage the weapon before they can launch it at Earth." Hawkins's fingers flew over the console, the stolen Krenim codes granting him access to the enemy's military network. Schematics and coordinates flashed across the screen. "Got it," he said. "The base's defenses are formidable, but there's a weakness. A single fighter might be able to slip through land undetected." Ethan nodded grimly. "Then that's our play. We commandeer a Krenim fighter, go in fast and quiet. Once we're inside, we find the planet killer and neutralize it. Whatever it takes." The team moved with purpose, arming themselves and prepping the captured Krenim fighter. Ethan settled into the pilot's seat, his hands gripping the unfamiliar controls. With a roar of engines, they blasted away from the station, pushing the fighter to its limits. The Krenim base grew in their view screen, a sprawling complex of angled metal and bristling defenses. Suddenly, alarms blared through the cockpit. "We've been detected!" Hawkins shouted over the din. Space lit up with plasma fire as a swarm of Krenim fighters descended upon them. Ethan wrenched the controls, sending their ship into a dizzying spiral. Behind him, his team manned the weapons, pulse cannons thundering. Ethan flew like a man possessed, weaving and jinking, dancing on the edge of the fighter's capabilities. The base's defenses filled the void with flak and missiles, but Ethan threaded the needle, an artist painting a masterpiece of aerial combat. With a final desperate maneuver, Ethan punched through the base's perimeter and brought the fighter down in a remote corner of the facility, skidding to a stop in a shower of sparks. They emerged into the base's stark corridors, weapons at the ready. Ethan led the way, navigating by the schematics flickering on his wrist computer. They moved like ghosts, slipping past Krenim patrols and security systems with pulse-pounding stealth. At last they stood before the doors of the central control room. Ethan exchanged a look with his team, a silent moment of understanding passing between them. Then, as one, they burst through the doors, weapons spitting fire. The Krenim scientists scattered, but one stood his ground, a tall, gaunt figure with cold, calculating eyes. Dr. Zorvax, the Krenim's lead researcher. "You're too late," Zorvax sneered as Ethan trained his rifle on him. "The planet killer is ready for launch, a genetically engineered supervirus designed to wipe out all life on a planetary scale. Even now it's loaded onto a stealth probe awaiting my command." Amidst the chaos, Zorvax lunged for the launch controls. His fingers danced across the keys and a cold, robotic voice filled the room. "Launch sequence initiated. T-minus 60 seconds. Ethan's heart stopped. There was no time to abort the launch, no time for half measures. He made his decision in the space between heartbeats. "Evacuate!" he roared to his team, already charging across the room. "Get clear!" Zorvax turned, eyes widening in surprise, as Ethan slammed into him. They tumbled into the stealth probe's payload bay, a tangle of flailing limbs and snarling faces. The bay doors hissed shut, sealing them inside. With a rumble that shook the earth, the stealth probe launched, blasting into the sky on a pillar of fire. Ethan, trapped in its belly with the madman who had engineered Earth's doom, could only watch through a tiny viewport as the ground fell away, the blue curve of the planet rising to meet the unforgiving blackness of space. Earth grew in the viewport, a sapphire jewel suspended in the void. But Ethan knew that beauty belied the terrible danger that hurtled towards it. The virus, the Krenim's ultimate weapon, would soon be unleashed upon his homeworld. The probe shuddered as it hit the upper atmosphere, its hull glowing red-hot. Ethan and Zorvax were thrown against the walls, the scientist's laughter ringing in the confined space. "I've lost, human," Zorvax spat, his eyes fever-bright. "In minutes the virus will be released. Billions will die, and the Krenim will rise from the ashes to reclaim our rightful place as masters of the galaxy." Ethan's gaze darted around the payload bay, searching for something, anything he could use. His eyes fell upon the shielded canister that housed the viral agent, and the manual release lever on its side. He surged forward, grappling with Zorvax. They fought in the cramped confines, trading blows as the probe shook around them. Zorvax was strong, his limbs augmented with Krenim cybernetics, but Ethan fought with the strength of desperation. With a final mighty effort, Ethan threw Zorvax aside and lunged for the canister. His fingers closed around the release lever. He hesitated, the enormity of the moment crashing over him. The lever would jettison the viral agent into space, but it would also open the payload bay doors. At this altitude, at this speed, it would be suicide. Zorvax staggered to his feet, his face a mask of hate. "You don't have the courage," he snarled. "You're weak like all your kind." The payload bay doors blew open with explosive force. Hurricane winds roared through the confined space, ripping the canister from its housing and hurling it out into the void. And Ethan, caught in the maelstrom, was yanked out into the howling sky. The last thing he saw was Zorvax's face, contorted in a scream of rage and disbelief. Then the darkness took him and he knew no more. Inside the cramped confines of the probe's payload bay, Ethan and Zorvax clashed in a brutal melee, fists and elbows smashing into flesh. Zorvax, his genetically enhanced body moving with blinding speed, hammered blows into Ethan's face and torso, driving the human back against the bulkhead. Ethan's head snapped back as Zorvax's fist cracked against his jaw. He tasted blood, felt it trickling from his split lip. The Krenim scientist loomed over him, eyes glinting with malice. "Your world will burn, human," Zorvax snarled, punctuating each word with a punch. "Your cities will crumble, your people will die screaming, and you will have failed them." Ethan blocked a strike, countering with a jab to Zorvax's throat. The Krenim gagged, staggering back. Ethan pressed the attack, launching a flurry of blows. But Zorvax was too fast, too strong. He caught Ethan's fist, twisted savagely. Ethan cried out as pain lanced up his arm. Zorvax slammed a knee into Ethan's gut, doubling him over, then smashed an elbow into the back of his neck. Ethan crashed to the deck, vision swimming. Zorvax kicked him in the ribs, the impact lifting him clear of the floor. He slammed into the bulkhead and slid down, leaving a smear of blood on the metal. Through the haze of pain, Ethan saw Zorvax standing over him, a cruel smile twisting his features. This is the best Earth has to offer. Pathetic. Rage surged through Ethan, white-hot and searing. He would not let it end like this. He would not fail. With a roar of defiance, he launched himself at Zorvax, tackling the Krenim around the waist. Ethan snatched it up, rolling clear of Zorvax. He stared at the object in his hand, a detonator, its button glowing a baleful red. He looked out the viewport, saw the blue curve of Earth filling the glass, growing larger by the second. He turned to Zorvax, saw the sudden fear in the Krenim's eyes. "You wouldn't," Zorvax hissed. "You'll die too." Ethan's thumb hovered over the detonator's button. He thought of Gomez, of all the others who had given their lives to stop the Krenim. Their sacrifices would not be in vain. The probe shuddered as the virus payload exploded, a searing white light engulfing the payload bay. The force of the blast slammed Ethan into the bulkhead, pain exploding through his body. Darkness crashed over him. He drifted in and out of consciousness, his world a blur of pain and fire. He felt the probe breaking apart around him, felt the icy chill of space leaching in through shattered hull plates. And then nothing. Silence and cold and the endless black of the void. Ethan's eyes fluttered open. He was floating, tumbling slowly end over end. The shattered remnants of the probe drifted around him, jagged metal and frozen globules of blood. His suit had sealed itself, protecting him from the vacuum. Ethan turned back to Earth, the planet's blue-white glow filling his vision. He had done it. He had stopped the attack. But at what cost? His suit's HUD flashed red, warning of dwindling oxygen reserves. He had minutes left, maybe less. As he floated there, his life ebbing away, Ethan's thoughts turned to his team, to the mission, to all they had endured. They had struck a blow against the Krenim today, a blow that would be felt across the galaxy. But the war was not over. The Krenim would return, their desire for conquest unquenched. Earth would need its defenders more than ever. With the last of his strength, Ethan activated his suit's emergency beacon, a final call for help. As his vision darkened at the edges, he saw a bright light growing in the distance, approaching fast. A rescue ship or the light at the end of the tunnel? Ethan's eyes drifted closed, his breath shallow in his ears. He had given everything for Earth, for the mission. His duty was done. Light pierced the darkness, a fuzzy, indistinct blur that slowly resolved into a sterile white ceiling. Ethan blinked, his eyes gritty, his mouth dry as cotton. He tried to move, but his body felt leaden, unresponsive. "Easy there, Lieutenant." A face swam into view above him, a woman in a medical uniform, her features etched with concern. "You've been through quite an ordeal." Ethan's memories came rushing back. The desperate fight aboard the probe, the detonation of the virus payload, the cold embrace of space. He bolted upright, ignoring the flare of pain in his ribs. "Where am I? What happened?" The medic placed a calming hand on his shoulder. "You're safe, Lieutenant Hicks. You're aboard the EDF ship Indomitable. We picked up your emergency beacon, managed to pull you out of the void just in time. It's a miracle you survived." Ethan sagged back against the pillows, relief washing over him. He had done it. He had stopped the Krenim's planet killer, saved Earth from annihilation. But at what cost? The medic seemed to read his thoughts. "Your team—" "I'm sorry, Lieutenant, there were no other survivors." Ethan closed his eyes, grief and guilt twisting in his gut like a knife. Gomez, Hawkins, all the others, they had followed him into hell without hesitation, and he had led them to their deaths. Days passed in a blur of medical tests and debriefings, as Ethan slowly regained his strength. He was hailed as a hero, the savior of Earth, but the accolades tasted like ashes in his mouth. He had only done what was necessary, what anyone would have done in his place. But even as Earth celebrated, the Krenim struck back with a vengeance. Reports flooded in of a massive offensive against Earth's colonies, the Krenim's ships and soldiers cutting a swath of destruction across the frontier. The EDF scrambled to respond, but they were woefully outmatched by the Krenim's superior numbers and advanced technology. Ethan watched the reports from his hospital bed, his fists clenched, his heart pounding. He couldn't just sit here while his comrades fought and died. He had to do something. Against the protests of the medics, Ethan hauled himself out of bed and marched into the Indomitable's command center. The officers turned to stare as he entered, his hospital gown flapping around his legs. "Lieutenant Hicks." The ship's captain, a grizzled veteran named Ironside, eyed him warily. "You should be in medical." "With respect, sir, I'm needed out there." Ethan gestured to the tactical displays, the red dots of Krenim ships swarming the green of Earth's defenses. "I have more experience fighting the Krenim than anyone. Let me help." Ironside hesitated, then nodded slowly. "Very well, Lieutenant. We could use a man of your skills. We're putting together a strike team for a desperate mission, a raid on the heart of the Krenim offensive, a heavily fortified staging point." Ethan's eyes narrowed. "I volunteer, sir." The staging point hung in space like a bloated metal spider, its docking arms bristling with Krenim warships. Ethan, clad once more in his battered EDF armor, crouched in the troop bay of a stealth shuttle, his new team hunched around him. There were a dozen of them, hand-picked volunteers, each one a veteran of a dozen battles. They checked their weapons, their faces grim, knowing the odds they faced. Ethan felt a strange calm settle over him as the shuttle drifted closer to the staging point, running silent to avoid detection. This was what he was meant for, the only thing that made sense in a galaxy gone mad. The shuttle shuddered as it latched onto the hull of the staging point, cutting through the thick metal with a beam of superheated plasma. Ethan was the first one through the breach, his pulse rifle up and ready. Alarms blared as the EDF team surged into the staging point's corridors, the thunder of their boots lost in the wail of sirens. Krenim soldiers boiled out of side passages, their weapons spitting deadly energy, but Ethan and his team cut them down with precise, disciplined fire. They fought their way deeper into the facility, following the schematics Ethan had memorized, aiming for the central command deck. Resistance grew heavier with every step, the Krenim throwing everything they had at the intruders. Ethan led from the front, his rifle blazing, his face a mask of determination. This was for Gomez, for Hawkins, for every soldier who had fallen to the Krenim's onslaught. He would end this here, now, no matter the cost. The command deck doors loomed ahead, a pair of massive blast shields guarded by a phalanx of elite Krenim warriors. Ethan and his team took cover, trading blistering fire with the defenders. "Grenades!" Ethan roared over the din of battle. The EDF soldiers lobbed plasma grenades, the explosions shaking the deck, the flash of detonations strobing through the smoke. In the chaos, Ethan saw his chance. He vaulted over his barricade and charged, a cry of defiance ripping from his throat. His rifle bucked in his hands, spitting blue-white bolts of energy, cutting down Krenim left and right. His team followed, a tide of unstoppable fury crashing over the Krenim defenses like a wave. They breached the command deck doors in a hail of fire and thunder, storming onto the bridge. The Krenim High Command turned to face them, their features twisted in shock and rage. At their center stood a tall, regal figure, his armor adorned with the sigils of high rank. "Surrender!" Ethan barked, his rifle leveled at the Krenim leader's chest. "It's over." But the Krenim commander only laughed, a cold, cruel sound. "You understand nothing, human. You think this is just about the Krenim. No, we are but pawns in a much greater game." He gestured, and a holographic display sprang to life above the command console. Ethan's eyes widened in horror at the sight that greeted him. A writhing mass of tentacles and pulsing flesh, a nightmarish creature out of the darkest depths of space, and wrapped in its coils, like puppets dangling on strings, were the Krenim, their eyes blank, their faces slack. "Behold the Zorthak," the Krenim commander intoned, his voice ringing with a fanatic's zeal. "The true masters of this galaxy, they have guided our hand, used us to weaken the other races, to pave the way for their glorious conquest." Ethan's mind raced, pieces falling into place with sickening clarity. The Krenim's sudden technological leap forward, their uncharacteristic aggression, it all made sense now. But even as the truth dawned, the Krenim commander was moving, his hand darting to the console. "And now, human, you will bear witness to their ascension." Ethan lunged, but he was too late. The commander's finger stabbed down on a glowing red button, and the deck shuddered beneath their feet. "Warning," a cold robotic voice intoned. "Command ship reactor overload initiated. Detonation in T-5 minutes." Ethan's blood ran cold. The reactors, of course. The source of the Zorthak's control signal, the key to their domination of the Krenim, and now it was set to blow, taking the command ship and everyone on it to oblivion. The Krenim commander grinned, a rictus of triumph. "You see, even in defeat we serve the Zorthak. Our deaths will be a small price to pay for their victory." Ethan's mind raced, desperately searching for a solution. And then it hit him. A plan so audacious, so desperate, that it just might work. His second-in-command, a tough, no-nonsense sergeant named Reeves, shook her head. "Negative, sir, we're not leaving you." Ethan gripped her shoulder, his eyes intense. "That's an order, Sergeant. The Zorthak have to be stopped, no matter the cost. Now go, before it's too late." Reeves hesitated, then snapped a salute. "Aye, sir, it's been an honor." She turned and barked orders, the EDF soldiers moving to obey. They filed off the command deck, heading for the escape pods, herding shell-shocked Krenim crew members with them. Ethan turned back to the console, his fingers flying over the controls. He had to find a way to stop the overload, or at least delay it long enough for the others to escape. But the Krenim systems were too alien, too complex. Every attempt was met with blaring alarms and flashing warning lights. The minutes ticked away with agonizing speed. "Warning," the robotic voice intoned. "Reactor detonation in T-1 minute." Ethan slammed his fist against the console in frustration. He had failed. The Zorthak would win and the galaxy would burn. And then a flash of inspiration, a last desperate gamble. He couldn't stop the overload, but maybe he could use it. "What are you doing?" the Krenim commander demanded, his eyes wide with sudden fear. Ethan turned to face him, a grim smile on his lips. "Ending this." He stabbed a final command, and the reactor let go with a roar of unleashed energy. A blinding white light engulfed the command deck, searing, all-consuming. In that instant, Ethan saw it all with perfect clarity. The reactor's detonation propagating outward in a wave of destruction, the command ship disintegrating around him, the Zorthak's control signal severed in a single cataclysmic blow. And beyond the Krenim, blinking and shaking their heads as if waking from a long, dark dream, free at last from the Zorthak's insidious control. Ethan closed his eyes, a sense of peace washing over him. He had done it. He had given his life, but in doing so, he had saved countless others. The Krenim would sue for peace. The galaxy would have a chance to heal. But even as the fire consumed him, Ethan knew that this was only the beginning. The Zorthak was still out there, still a threat. The galaxy would have to stand united, would have to fight as one to face the challenges ahead. His last thought, as the light faded and the darkness closed in, was of Earth, of the rolling green hills and the vast blue oceans, of the people he had sworn to protect, the people he had given everything for. Remember the sacrifices that had been made. Remember the heroes who had fallen. Remember Ethan Hicks, the man who had saved the galaxy. You have reached the end of the story. If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel, and for every comment that says 88, I will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.